company that I was at, Landtech, was the simple case in lean thinking. So I lived through the transformation of Landtech from a traditional batch and queue type of company with traditional planning systems, traditional accounting systems, everything like a normal traditional company is, that we've learned how to do when we went to college, or, you know, these were the things we were taught to do, and so we kept doing them. And then we found out that there maybe would be better ways. And so I lived through that type of transformation as their CFO. I was responsible not only for the accounting and finance function, but also human resources and information systems. And occasionally our overall lean resources reported to me. So I really come to you as a practitioner. I come to you as someone who sort of lived this. And I come to really share with you experiences that I gained through that transformation. Now, what allows us to move from the traditional standard cost system in the lean environment to the lean statement? Because this is really where I wanted to get us to. In the traditional environment, we are organized functionally. And so we have welding together, and we have quality together, and we have order entry together, and we have engineering together, and they have cost centers. And so when we were trying to answer the question, what is a product cost, which, by the way, is a dumb question, but let's just say we want to answer that question. We would go with our standard cost system, and it would take a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and a little bit of this, and all of a sudden we can say, voila, here is the cost of the product. Now, we've created lean factories, and in our factory, instead of being organized by welding and shipping and all of that, we were organized around the products we were making. So we had product lines. Some people call them value streams. There's different things you could call them. And we began to dedicate resources to these lines. And I don't mean just direct labor. I'm talking about supervision, material handling, quality, etc., every different kind of area. So all of a sudden, now we could naturally get the information about who are the people, what are the supplies, what are the things that it takes to make product A. We don't have to dip in the pot for a little of everything. We can just see, well, there's product A, these are the people. And we can see who's on product B. And so as we dedicated resources to products, it became very easy to do the accounting. So the information requirements decreased. All of that information we were collecting about how much time spent on each product was no longer necessary. It was obvious and visual right from the floor. Now, another thing happened that made it really important to make this shift is, as I mentioned, instead of just making the quantities that the computer system told us to make, we were making the quantities based on what customers ordered from us. That was what, you know, sort of dictated what we would make. And so any measures that said how much of our machine were we using or how much of people's time were we using was really not useful anymore at all in the short term, because we knew we were going to make what the customer wanted. And so metrics and information about were we making what the customer wanted, when we wanted it, became the information that we needed to have in order to determine were we achieving our mission in our lean factory. Now add to that the benefit that our inventories were going down quickly as we made this transformation. I mean, reducing batch size and creating pull, the end result of that is inventory reduction. You don't have to start lean saying, let's reduce inventory. All you have to do is say, let's reduce the batch size, let's create pull, and inventory will naturally go down. So we didn't have a lot of inventory to value, so that made it easy too for the accountants that we had a simpler problem. So here is an example of where we really needed to align information so that it was in sync with the transformation that we were making. Oh, I went the wrong way. Now, let me get sort of now a little real world. Really nice, isn't that nice? We got rid of standard cost accounting, but we have some real important decisions to make for our company, and I need information to do it. So let's think about some kinds of decisions that companies have to make. So let's give this first one, which is the one I get all the time. Sales wants to sell some product, and should we take this order or not? Okay, is it priced properly? How will we price the product? It's always a big question, have we priced properly? This actually is an example of a company that bought a huge press. They bought it really cheap. They were using about 10% of the press's capability, and they asked sales to go out and sell stuff that we could make on that machine. So here's the normal way that they were looking at it, and they said, look, we've quoted it at $30 a unit. Our standard cost for this product is $25 a unit, so it has a gross margin of $5 a unit. If I divide 5 into 30, I get a gross margin percentage, which is how we often deal with these things, and it's almost 17%. And the finance folks say, not acceptable because we're trying to get to 28%. We're currently at 23. If we take these orders, our gross margin is going to go down. No way, don't take the order. Well, that's what actually happened at this company. They were telling sales, we're not going to take these orders. So they called me, and they said, Jean, would you come in and talk to these guys? Well, let me just jump ahead. By the way, they threw me out. They didn't believe the thing I said at first. So I'll just tell you right here. This isn't always easy. So I said, look, let's look at the information behind the standard cost thing. Now, if you notice here on the chart, see this 23? I'm sure you can't see my marker, so I'm going to try to do that. 23,000, 23 million, pick your poison, 23,000 of margin on 100,000 of sales. That's where that 23% came from. I said they're currently at 23%. That's where that comes from, 23 divided by 100,000. But what we find out is if you look in a plain English financial, you'll see that there's material associated with the products. There's direct costs, people that actually work in that cell that I was telling you about, the people really working on the products, not direct labor, the people who work on the products, which could include direct labor, but it could be more. And then there's shared costs. These are the costs that keep the factory running. It's management, it's the building, it's the depreciation, it's all these sorts of things. So now we can look at this information, this decision that we needed to make on should we take the order a little bit different way. And in this particular case, the material per unit was $6 a unit, and we'd have to hire one more person. So sales told us they have a 50% probability of selling 10,000 units and a 95% probability of selling 2,500 units. Now the math is easy. You don't have to be an accountant to figure this out, right? You just say, okay, well, if I sell 10,000 of them, I know how much revenue. Remember the sales price was $30? That's kind of simple math, 30 times, 10,000. And the material is going to be $6 times 10,000. And I got to hire another person. Oh, well, they're about 40,000. I'm going to have additional profit of $200,000. Now that sounds pretty darn good, doesn't it? It sounds really good, right? Instead of 23,000. But what if these salespeople, they always say they're going to sell more than they are. So maybe they're only going to sell 2,500. We can do the same math, and now all of a sudden we're going to have 20,000 of additional profit. Now, is this a good decision? It's easier to look at the components, isn't it? Now we can see the difference between a cost that's going to vary with taking the orders and costs that aren't. And we can group it all together, and we can all of a sudden say that no matter how much they sell, they're going to improve their gross margin. Because why? Because some costs don't vary with volume. All those shared costs they had, they didn't have to go up the same. So with easy to see information, now we can start to improve our decision making. So having the right information about what's going on is serious, serious stuff. Don't play around with this. And I just want to show you that as you are doing your lean transformation, I want you to think about what information are you basing your decisions on? And are they driving you to make good decisions that are in alignment with your lean efforts, but also in alignment with the value that you're creating? Let's do one more little quick one. You'll probably get it after the first two. So what happens if we're going to insource? So here's a common problem, right? We've done our lean efforts. We've created capacity. And the capacity might, by the way, be in the IT organization. It might be on the shop floor. It might be in order entry, whoever, I'm going to give you a manufacturing example. We've created capacity. We've figured out a way to do things simpler, easier. We've made a promise to our employees that we will not lay off. but people will have to take different kinds of jobs as we do this transformation, but they won't lose their employment. So one of the things we want to do is we want to pull in some of the things that we're having outside vendors do for us. So let's see what would happen here. Traditionally, what happens when you're going to evaluate should you pull a product in from outside, you take your standard hours. So let's say there's 3 functions, A, B, and C. You take your standard hours, you apply the rate associated with that work center, you come up with the labor and overhead costs, you add to it the material cost to come up with your total cost. In this particular case, $429. The vendor that we're currently buying it from charges us $200. Who's going into their boss and saying, hey, let's insource this thing? Who's going to have the guts to do that? Who's going to have the confidence in their financial knowledge to go toe-to-toe with your CFO and say, we should insource this product? It's hard to do, right? So let's make sure we have the right information. Here's the lean information. We'd say, it would take $70 per item of material costs. We think we're going to make 1,000 units, so we're going to spend $70,000. We're going to have to utilize 3 people, let's say at a cost of $120,000. We're going to have some additional utilities. See how these are real? These are real things you're doing. These are actually physical actions you're taking. And we're putting money to these physical actions. Now it's $192,000. Now at the vendor, at 200 for 1,000 units, we're going to spend $200,000. Doesn't this decision look different now? Now I have the right information to say what's going on. The same problem was happening before with my standard cost system as I buried in all of those costs that did not vary with volume, and so I was getting a very misleading picture. And so here is an example, again, of where it's so important to have the right information, simple information. This isn't higher math. This is easier math than what you do in running your home. So, you know, this is what we want. When I got my MBA, we went around the room and said, I was with executive MBA program, and we said, why are you getting your MBA? 2/3 of the class said it was because I need to understand the numbers. There's something wrong with that. Numbers should be easy, and we can make them easier. And in our information systems, if you are being driven to add more and more and more financial hooks into your system, it's a really good time to start to ask, why am I doing this? The big difference we found in our company with lean measures compared to our traditional was that before, all of our measures were to tell management how are we doing. And they were in the computer system, and they would be spit out at the end of the month, and we would find out how we were doing. But after we learned lean thinking and lean approach, we realized that we needed metrics that helped management to tell the workers what was important. Now, if we're going to do that, our measures needed to be few in number. We didn't want too many because we wanted to be able to help people focus on what was important. And they needed to be simple because they needed to be terms that lots of people would understand. If you're an HR person, I hope I don't offend you, but I would show the metrics to our HR manager and make sure she understood them, and I figured if she could, everybody else was going to. So that was our, sort of acid test. So we also, of course, want metrics that are going to motivate the behavior of what we're trying to go for. So if we're trying to motivate behavior for less rework, we want to have things that relate to less rework. We want them to be simple. I think that accounting, IT, and human resources are actually very, very similar. In that they're similar in that they have a dual responsibility. On one hand, we have what we would call lean for IT, or lean for accounting, or lean for human resources, which is how can we use lean principles to do the work of IT better? Manage our projects faster, get laptops on desk faster, reduce the calls into the call center, and all that sort of stuff. That's what I call lean for IT. And then there's the part, which is the other part, that these 3 groups have a special, which is IT for lean, or HR for lean, accounting for lean, which that means what do we need to do in these functions because our operational partners have changed? If our customers have changed, we have to react. So they are changing. If they have adopted lean, they are changing. And so we're going to have to do something seriously different. Now the other picture that we created was sort of these three goal statements. The top one was we wanted to support the organization as it changed. We wanted to be there with them. Second of all, we wanted to make sure that the information we were providing to the organization actually met their needs, so that it was useful in terms of the kinds of decision they were making. And this is whether you're in IT, HR, or accounting. This is exactly the same way that we can think about the work that we provide. And then last of all, we want to eliminate waste, not only in our own operations, but in our customers that we serve internally as well. So this is really important. Now, for IT folks, one of the things that we realized if we were going to do this is that we used to invest in our IT people going to training outside the company, because technology changes all the time. That's the thing that really differentiates it from these other functions as well. I mean, you guys have an incredible job of keeping up with technology shift. But if you're going to support the change in the organization and optimize the information, you may have to make a decision to spend the next year all of your training time on on-the-job training to really understand what's going on in your business. So for instance, when we had our Kaizen events, we would never have Kaizen events without IT people participating. Not because we were going to make IT changes. In fact, we made a rule that you could have no IT changes when you were doing Kaizen. IT changes were not allowed. So why would you have IT people there? Well, what I found was that the IT people know much more about what's already in the system that's not being used. There's usually so much functionality in the systems already that people just don't even know how to use. So that's great to have those people. But more importantly, our IT folks could really see from an application development point of view, where is the business going? So that when it is time to break down the system barrier to continued improvement, that they know what's happening. Probably one of my worst fears with some of my clients is that they will work very hard on their lean efforts, and then they'll get to a point where their continuous improvement efforts begin to slow because the computer systems they have really are a barrier to change. And so they go out and they hire a third-party integrator. They select some great software, and they bring this third-party integrator in, and the third-party integrator knows nothing about lean, but they do have a schedule, and they do have their own set of metrics of how long it should take different people to do things. And so they come in and they erase the benefits that you've gained already. So we really need our IT folks to really understand what the business is trying to accomplish, so we don't erase the gains that we've already created. Thank you very much.